Well, hello there. Welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Lachadello.
This week, Democrats go from despair to delight as Joe Biden passes the torch to Kamala Harris, rekindling hopes that Trump can be beaten.
We've got two great guests for you tonight. Former Democratic Senator Carol Moseley Braun and Republican pollster Whit Ayers. But first...
It was on Sunday, just after 2 p.m. on America's East Coast, when the news broke.
President Biden will step aside as the presumptive Democratic nominee. He will suspend his bid for a second term, and instead he will pave the way for a different Democratic candidate to face former President Trump this November.
The announcement had come 15 minutes earlier on Twitter, on Joe Biden's personal account, on personal letterhead. At first, it wasn't really clear what was happening. He recounted some of what he sees as the main achievements of his 3.5 years in office, rebuilding the nation, lowering prescription drug costs, expanding affordable healthcare, and passing the most significant climate legislation in history. Okay, but then came the words that many of his fellow Democrats had been calling for. While it had been his intention to seek re-election, he believes it's in the best interests of the party and the country for him to stand down from the campaign. Biden said that he would speak to the nation later in the week. It's understood that his voice was still strained by the COVID infection he developed last week, taking him off the campaign trail. That speech to happen tomorrow in Australia.
Honestly, John, it's such a tragic and ironic announcement for Biden to have to make on National Ice Cream Day of all the days. It's just not right, John.
So very cruel. But then came a second post from Biden's account. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Vice President Harris, who had spoken to Biden several times on Sunday and knew what was coming, also then took to Twitter to say that she was honoured to have Biden's endorsement and that it was her intention to earn and win this nomination. But it soon became pretty clear the nomination wouldn't take much earning. Bill and Hillary Clinton joined a growing chorus of praise for Biden and offered their support for Vice President Harris, pledging to do whatever they can to support her. Clearly, former President Barack Obama also thought Biden had made the right decision too, posting that Biden is, quote, one of America's most consequential presidents and a patriot of the highest order. But notably, Obama did not immediately endorse Kamala Harris, preserving his role as the Democrats' unifier in case there were other contenders. He needn't have worried. Potential rivals for the Democratic presidential nomination started to quickly rule themselves out, possibly eyeing off a potential VP slot. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro saying he'll do everything he can to elect Harris as president. California Governor Gavin Newsom also endorsed Harris as tough, fearless and tenacious. Plenty of other Democrats then jumped on the Harris bandwagon, although, like Obama, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi issued a statement praising Joe Biden's greatness and goodness, but avoiding an immediate endorsement of Harris. Also staying conspicuously silent on Sunday, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Kentucky's Andy Beshear and Maryland's Wes Moore. And West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who quit the Democratic Party in May, was reportedly considering re-registering as a Democrat and entering the 2024 presidential race. But on Monday, he told CBS he was not going to be a candidate for president and he favoured a mini primary to replace Biden. But as the day progressed, that possibility too seemed to vanish as one by one those conspicuously silent potential rivals to Harris spoke up, bowed out and endorsed her. And then it seemed the deal was finally done.
This is a letter from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, just released a statement. No surprise here, she's endorsing Kamala Harris for president.
And so, late on Monday, the Vice President travelled to the old Biden-Harris campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, to talk to the staff who are now working to elect Harris in November. President Biden was on speakerphone as his old campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, looked on.
We're still fighting in this fight together. I'm not going anywhere. And I want you to know you've always had my back, and I promise you, I will always have your back. And I'm anxious for you all to hear from Kamala.
And as Kamala took the stage, Biden was still listening in.
We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
There was a lot of love in the room and then excitement. as Harris gave a preview of her line of attack on Trump, recounting her experiences as a prosecutor and attorney general in California.
Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who ripped off consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
So that right there is the choice that Kamala Harris wants this election to be about, the prosecutor versus the perpetrator. She also pivoted as well to an Obama-like positive message about the future while framing Trump as a man of the past. She has 105 days to make that case.
But what about the reaction from Republicans? Well, within a couple of hours, Trump's super PAC had already knocked their first attack ad out.
Kamala was in on it. She covered up Joe's obvious mental decline.
Our president is in good shape, in good health, tireless, vibrant, and I have no doubt about the strength of the work that we have done.
But Kamala knew Joe couldn't do the job, so she did it. Look what she got done. A border invasion, runaway inflation, the American dream dead. They created this mess. Kamala owns this failed record.
Ron DeSantis used basically the same attack lines, although he added on, Democrats are just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. While the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, was concerned about respecting the will of Democratic voters.
14 million people went through the process and chose this nominee, Joe Biden. Now a handful of people have gotten together and decided he's no longer suitable. That's not how this system works. They are violating democratic principles. And I think that's a real problem, and I think there'll be a lot said about that in the days ahead.
He's always really cared about Democratic voters, Mike
Nice
Johnson.
of him, nice of him.
Although it is interesting to see one of the main players trying to overturn the 2020 election worrying about democracy. Whereas Trump, he just thought the whole thing was unfair. He asked,
so we're forced to spend time and money on fighting crooked Joe Biden. Now we have to start all over again. Shouldn't the Republican Party be reimbursed for fraud?
In fact, Trump thought it might be a conspiracy.
Biden never had COVID. He's a threat to democracy.
Some of the attacks against Harris, though, were downright ugly.
This woman, this disaster whose only qualification was having a vagina and the right skin color. She is the DEI hire. She's the diversity, equity, inclusion hire. Ask Willie Brown. Ask Mayor Willie Brown how she got her first job, okay? Just Google Willie Brown and Kamala Harris and talk to me about her qualifications.
Maybe while you're there, you might want to Google Seb Gorka Nazi.
That there is touche, is a preview of what's to come over the next 4 months. By the way, Gorka was referring to the fact that Willie Brown dated Kamala Harris while he was separated from his wife, like 20 years ago. Others had more idiosyncratic concerns, though.
She wants to ban plastic straws. I love my plastic straw. I hate those paper straws. Anyway.
Me too, Sean. I'm with you, mate. But the most common criticism from Republicans by far was of Joe Biden. J.D. Vance, for instance, asked, how can Biden justify remaining president? Not running for re-election is a clear admission that Biden isn't mentally fit enough to serve as commander-in-chief. There's no middle ground. Well, Biden thinks there's a middle ground because in his letter, he never said that he wasn't mentally fit enough for any role. He simply said, I believe it's in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down. That was it. That's all he said. So this argument is going to continue. And just to be clear what this is actually about, Republicans want Harris to become president so they can put her under instant performance pressure.
Sure.
But also, they're probably aware that she would have to get the new vice president through Congress. It takes a vote in Congress, right? So they could dirty her up by not letting her get that vote. And then, if there's another January 6, if there's no vice president, the person in control of the certification of the election results would be from the party who controls the new Senate. And that party is expected to be Republican. So that's why Joe Biden is not going to be resigning that presidency, at least until January 6, no matter what Republicans say.
Meanwhile, Democratic donors seem to think that there is no doubt Kamala Harris is a better bet than Joe Biden. After reports that Biden's fundraising in July had plummeted following his woeful debate performance, switching to Harris this week saw a record $81 million pour into campaign coffers in the first 24 hours alone. And a major Democrat super PAC received pledges of another $150 million in a day. That would be a very good month's fundraising, all in 24 hours.
OK, so what about the polls, though? First of all, well, we should ask, how bad was Biden's situation that made him give up? The answer is pretty bad. Emerson was showing Trump well ahead in all the swing states, including up by 3 in Michigan and 5 in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And remember, Biden has to win all 3 of those states. CNN was projecting that Trump was cruising to an easy win.
If he just won the states on this map that we have as either solid or leaning Republican, he's already the next president of the United States, 272 electoral votes. But the data in recent days, we know Trump is now ahead. Let me turn this off here. Trump is now ahead in Pennsylvania. Trump is now ahead in Wisconsin. Trump is ahead in this Nebraska congressional district. Trump is ahead out here in Arizona. Let's turn all that. That's 313 electoral votes right there.
And then it started getting worse. On the day that Biden pulled out, a Detroit Free Press poll of likely Michigan voters found Trump leading in Michigan by 7 points. The problem could best be summed up, I think, with net approval ratings amongst their respective bases. Now, what I mean by that is if you look at Republicans' approval of Trump minus their disapproval, have a look, it's been going up all year. That's what's supposed to happen during an election year. But if you look at the Democrats' approval of Biden minus their disapproval, that's been going down all year, and it really trailed off just now for the debate. That there is the sign of a blowout. In fact, an AP poll found about 65% of Democrats wanted Biden to withdraw from the race. That is simply not sustainable. But how about Harris? How's she polling? Well, at NBC, they averaged all the major polls since the debate, and this is what they found.
Okay, if Kamala Harris does become the Democratic candidate, does that change things? So the same polls that produced this average since the debate in the Biden-Trump race, what do they show when Harris is substituted in? A difference, but it's a difference of a point. The Biden at 45, Harris in these same polls, an average 46%, Trump 47% in both of them. So you look at this, and Kamala Harris is not entering, at least in the head-to-head standpoint, with an obvious strength over Joe Biden.
So what's the point of Biden dropping out if his replacement is doing pretty much the same as he did? Well, things were getting worse for Biden fast. Just this week, he didn't seem to realise that his Secret Service director was a woman.
Is it acceptable that you have still not heard, at least publicly, from the Secret Service director?
Oh, I've heard from him.
From him? He also seemed to forget the name of his defence secretary, referring to him as that black man.
Look at the heat I'm getting, because I named the Secretary of Defense the black man.
Oh, and as a little aside, the network that he called Lloyd Austin that black man on was the Black Entertainment Network. Then he tried to head off all those doubts by releasing a new policy of capping rental rises to no more than 5% a year. But then he got confused and stuffed up the whole announcement.
Look, folks, the idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55.
Oh, he looks so confused. That was so embarrassing. Meanwhile, 31 House Democrats and 4 Senate Democrats have already asked him to step down, even before this week. And then this week, supporters were going to start running ads against him as well.
It's time to pass the torch and let us choose a new nominee.
One who can bring new energy, new hope. And make sure Donald Trump never gets near the White House again.
And finally, as you said before, John, the money had dried up. So Biden didn't really have a choice. He had to go.
Yeah, indeed not. And at the end of that first day, Kamala Harris had clinched the majority of delegates to become the nominee. They do say that a week is a long time in politics. Sometimes even a day can get longer than that. We have a very special guest for you now, though. Kamala Harris is just the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. Carol Moseley Braun was was the first. She also ran for the Democratic presidential nomination back in 2004 and later became a United States ambassador. Carol Moseley Braun joins us now from Chicago. Madam Ambassador, welcome to Planet America.
Thank you for having me.
So, a woman of colour is about to become the Democratic Party's presidential nominee for 2024. How do you feel about that?
I feel great. I'm going to do everything. I would have followed Joe Biden to the gates of hell because I have all friends. We've been friends for 40 years almost now. And I really came to admire him. And he's done a great job as president. Having said that, he now has tapped Kamala Harris to be his replacement as a presidential nominee on the Democratic ticket. And I'm going to work as hard as I know how for her because I think she has the competence, she has the qualifications to do the job, she's got the right moral compass, and I support her work. And so I think this will be a great opportunity to move the ball forward in terms of progress for women, certainly, progress for people of other than white people, let's say mixed people, because she is both Indian and African American. So it's going to be a great thing for our country and for the world to show the direction that progress can take us if we just kind of break down some of the barriers to contribution that have been existing in the past and just move forward. And I think we can move forward comfortably with Kamala Harris.
Now, you said you were happy to keep on supporting Joe Biden. Do you feel like he was pushed out, or do you think it was the right decision to make?
He was pushed out, but he did the right thing. He always does. This man with a great moral compass, and he made the decision himself. Nobody forced him to make this decision. Joe is that kind of secure in himself and who he is, and he knew. I talked with him 2 weeks ago. I thought that he was fine. But the debate performance was horrible, and it really gave permission for people who wouldn't have liked him anyway. You know, when one of our former presidents once called a nattering nabob of negativism, and you're always going to have that out in politics. But the nattering nabobs were getting to him, and he deserved better than he was treated. But having reached his decision, I'm happy to support that decision. And I think he made the best decision, not just for himself, but for the country.
In just the first couple of days, of course, we've already seen a lot of very racist and gendered language being applied to Vice President Harris, a lot of affirmative action, DEI kind of stuff. What do you think is the best way for the Vice President to respond to those attacks?
I would tell her not to take the bait. I would tell her just keep going on what it is you have to give to the American people, and that will hopefully build a constituency to elect her president. I think she does have that. I mean, she's got a good story to tell, not of a girl, raised by a single mother who came got herself educated, who made a good record for herself in her public service beforehand, and has done a good thing in the Senate. She's been a stellar, exemplary political office holder, and so if she doesn't let herself get drugged into all the negative conversations, because they will come up with them. They're criticizing her smile. I ask you, who gets criticized for their smile? I mean, seriously. And so they will come at her with everything they've got, everything but the kitchen sink, as my grandmother would say. And all she has to do is just kind of hold her ground, know who she is, communicate that with the American people. I believe she'll be able to get a working majority and win the presidential election.
Now, there are those who say that the last thing the Democrats need after having not a very real primary and then losing their candidate is to have another coronation rather than having a real contest at the convention. What do you say to those people?
I say she's got the votes of the majority of the delegates, and they need to just go with that. And she's the choice of Joe Biden. I mean, come on. Are we going to continue to change the rules when it's a black woman up next to back? I mean, seriously. She has earned her spot, and she's earned the right to be our nominee. I say I'm a delegate to the convention, which is in my hometown also. So, but she's earned it. And I'm going to stick with her and do everything I can to make sure that she gets the nomination secured before the end of August.
So let's get into the Veep stakes. Who do you think her running mate should be, and what do they need to bring to the ticket?
I haven't spoken to her yet. I've just been out here just pounding the hustings as much as I can on her behalf. But she brings California. The entire California delegation is behind her. She brings, which is one of the biggest states we have in terms of electoral votes. We have an electoral college to get through. And one of the mistakes that people make thinking about U.S. politics, it's not just the popular vote, because both Hillary Clinton, President Hillary Clinton, and Al Gore won the popular vote in the presidential race. But it really is a matter of who has the delegates in terms of the electoral college. That becomes a second hurdle to have to overcome. Right now, Kamala has enough delegates to become the Democratic nominee. Whether or not she wins enough states to have the electoral college votes line up for her is what we're all focused on. And I don't know where she is with that. I haven't been close to the counting, but at the end of the day, this whole process, the thing about democracy, it comes down to, can you count? You know, any democracy, it's how many votes do you have? And it's not what the polls say, it's not what Joe says, it's not what Fred says, it's how many votes do you have? And I think she can put the voting parcel together sufficient to become our nominee and to win the presidential election.
Carol Moseley Braun, thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Landing a man. Have a dream. President and Mrs. Truman return from a 20...
It's March 29th, 1952. Democratic President Harry S. Truman is giving a speech at the annual Jefferson-Jackson fundraising dinner at the National Guard Armory in Washington, D.C. It's a little after 10:30 p.m. 5,000 party bigwigs who paid $100 a plate to be there don't know it yet, but in a moment, the 66-year-old president is going to make an important announcement.
Whoever the Democrats nominate for president this year, he will have this record to run upon. I shall not be a candidate for re-election. I have served my country long and I think efficiently and honestly. I shall not accept a renomination.
Truman has been president already for almost 7 years, being sworn in after the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1945. But at the time, he was still eligible to run for another 4-year term. On this night, over the objections of the party faithful, Harry makes it clear he's had enough.
I do not feel that it is my duty to spend another 4 years in the White House.
By 1952, Truman's popularity had plummeted to just 22%, the lowest ever in the history of the Gallup poll. It was a far cry from the early days of his presidency, when one of his first acts was to order the use of the atomic bombs against Japan.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT.
It was one of the most momentous decisions ever made by an American leader and hastened the end of the Second World War. At the time, Harry S. Truman, the former Missouri farmer turned haberdasher turned senator, was hailed as a folk hero, an American everyman.
Harry S. Truman is fundamentally an average American, not rich but not poor, not sophisticated but far from naive, an early riser and a hard worker, and very much a family man.
Oh, I'm just wild about Harry.
Truman's approval rating soared to 87%, one of the highest ever, but another war in Korea, a Cold War with former ally, the Soviet Union, a sputtering US economy, corruption and political gridlock all saw voters looking for somebody new. And the Republican Party found him in former Allied Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower. So Harry S. Truman decided to head home to Missouri. Although historians now rank Harry Truman as among the very best of American presidents. And, fun fact, the S in Harry S. Truman stood for nothing. He had no middle name, just an initial. S was a compromise between the names of his two grandfathers. Whether it was coincidence or by design, Joe Biden's decision to exit the 2024 presidential race overshadowed Donald Trump's victory lap following a mostly very successful Republican convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin last week. Taking the stage just 5 days after narrowly surviving that assassination attempt and after a warm-up act including Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan, the former president began his acceptance speech with a call for unity.
I am running to be president for all of America, not half of America, because there is no victory in winning for half of America.
And then in a rather un-Trump-like tone, he reflected on how close he had come to death.
As you already know, the assassin's bullet came within a quarter of an inch of taking my life. So many people have asked me, what happened? Tell us what happened, please. And therefore, I will tell you exactly what happened. And you'll never hear it from me a second time because it's actually too painful to tell.
And for the next 10 minutes, a sombre Trump talked about what happened to him and his gratitude to those who supported him. While it wasn't an artful speech, it was heartfelt, it was effective, until it went off the rails completely for the next hour or so as he riffed and rambled about, like when he ordered the Navy to redesign their destroyers to look more like luxury yachts.
These are now the most beautiful. They look like yachts. They said, we have to take the bow and we have to make it a little nicer and a little point at the top instead of a flat nose. And the people at the shipyard said, this guy sort of knows what he's doing. We have the most beautiful ships, right?
Was that really what they were saying at the shipyards?
Sure. As he said, John, Trump was early on a very restrained, grateful Trump. This is what he said about his crowd when the bullets started flying.
And when even a single bullet is fired, just a single bullet, and we had many bullets that were being fired, crowds run for the exits or stampede, but not in this case. It's very unusual. This massive crowd of tens of thousands of people stood by and didn't move an inch. In fact, many of them bravely but automatically stood up looking for where the sniper would be. They knew immediately it was a sniper. And then began pointing at him. You can see that if you look at the group behind me.
I thought it worked really well, but that was just the first third of the speech. Like John said, the rest was basically a phoned-in, improvised rally speech. His planned remarks were actually only 3,000 words long, but what he said ran 12,000 words long. Even the hardcore MAGA fans at the convention centre were struggling to stay awake. Very low energy, Donald. Nevertheless, they did work hard at the convention to push that unity theme throughout the entire 4 days. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to act cheery, although it kind of came off as a little frightening.
Donald Trump has, and he will, make America successful again. He will make us wealthy again.
I should have given a content warning for that clip. And they ran all kinds of genuinely diverse speakers, from union leaders to OnlyFans models. Amber Rose, the OnlyFans model as referred to, was particularly effective in talking about how she came from the left.
I realize Donald Trump and his supporters don't care if you're black, white, gay, or straight. It's all love. And that's when it hit me. These are my people. This is where I belong. So I let go of my fear of judgment, of being misunderstood, of getting attacked by the left, and I put the red hat on too. Thank you.
But unfortunately, the unity theme ran aground when Congressman Matt Gaetz spied the man that he ousted from the speakership, Kevin McCarthy, conducting a TV interview in the corner, and he tried to troll him live on air.
What night are you speaking? Are you speaking tonight? Or one person? No. say, you're not. If you took that stage, you would get booed off of it. You would get booed off the stage.
And then Kevin McCarthy returned serve during his next interview.
You know, he looks very unhinged. I mean, a lot of people have concerns about him. And I'm not sure if he was on something, but I do hope he gets the help that he needs. But more importantly, I hope the young women get the justice they deserve when it comes to him.
I mean, you're referring to the House Ethics Committee investigation that is ongoing.
Yeah, with his partner in jail because they paid underage women for sex and drugs. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Unity, hey? By the way, that happened on the Tuesday when Matt Gaetz looked like this. Yet somehow the next day he looked like this. Gaetz' colleague Derek Van Orden tweeted, "Breaking! RNC debuts first AI-powered inflatable sex doll to speak at the National Convention." And yes, people were also pretty unified online, mocking Matt Gaetz' new face. There was almost no talk of January 6 or the 2020 vote or lawfare, any of that divisive stuff. Really, the only consistently negative angles at the convention were the repeated anti-trans comments, as well as some of the immigration rhetoric, like this, for instance.
Every day, Americans are dying. Murdered, assaulted, raped by illegal immigrants that the Democrats have released.
That's not so unifying. Nevertheless, they did win over CNN's Van Jones.
This spirit that this guy has, you guys think this because he's drunk? He's not. This whole thing is like this. And hey guys, the last time I was in a convention that felt like this was Obama 2008. There's something happening.
Obama-esque, John. So did they keep the Obama-esque vibe going past the convention?
Well, kinda. Back on the campaign trail in Michigan on Saturday, before news of Biden's exit had broken, it was pretty much vintage Trump. Talk of unity tossed aside, Trump freestyled his greatest hits against Democrats, immigrants and stupid people, including this bizarre claim about his intelligence compared to Biden's.
He has about a 70 IQ, and he's going against 210, and it never works out.
I don't remember Obama saying that, John.
Yeah, he must have at some point. But Trump has always refused to disclose any academic records, much less IQ tests. In fact, his former fixer Michael Cohen says that Trump told him to threaten schools not to release Trump's grades. And Trump's claim to have a 210 IQ seems unlikely, to say the least. It would put him among the smartest humans in history, on a par with a guesstimate of Shakespeare's intelligence. As for his claim that Joe Biden has an IQ of 70, well, that would put Joe in the bottom 2% of Americans, on the borderline with being defined as having mental retardation.
Oh, God, I don't want to make too much out of this, but for the record, any IQ above 145 places you in the top 0.1% of society. So it becomes increasingly difficult to measure with a standard IQ test anything above that. In other words, if someone tells you that they have an IQ above 145, they probably have an IQ well below 145.
And intelligence has long been something of an obsession with Donald Trump, and he's now declared Kamala Harris as being dumb as a rock. Many eagle-eyed Planeteers this week spotted something a little odd at the Republican convention. A volunteer firefighter's jacket allegedly belonging to the Trump supporter killed last week, Corey Comprator. It was on the stage with him, and in a moving moment, Trump kissed the helmet. But see there, the jacket misspells Corey Comprator's last name, leaving out the A. So, was this a fake prop jacket? Some folks on ex-Twitter certainly smelled a rat from frauds, users and scum. And maybe it confused Trump a little too, because he also got Comprator's name wrong in Wisconsin.
Corey Comparator, unbelievable person, everybody tells me.
And Trump flubbed it again in Michigan.
We remain in contact and send our deepest respect to the families. Corey, as you know, Corey Comparator was a brave firefighter who died, funeral yesterday.
Turns out there is no great conspiracy, though. Fact checkers found that it was Comparator's real jacket. His name was misspelled long before the RNC. There was not enough space on the uniform for all the letters, so they just left the A out on purpose. So claims that it was all a fake are in fact malarkey.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
Well, if Democrats have been on a roller coaster of emotions this week, so too have Republicans, after coming close to losing their nominee to an assassin, to then celebrating all things Trump at their national convention, then seeing the man they thought they had the measure of, Joe Biden, bow out of the race. After all of that, where is this campaign standing for them and where might it be headed? Dr Whit Ayers is a legend of Republican politics, a top pollster and strategist. He's worked for presidential candidates including Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis. Whit Ayers, welcome back to Planet America.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
A week ago, Whit, your party looked as though it was odds on to sweep the White House, hold on to the House, take the Senate. Joe Biden then exited the race. How profoundly has this campaign shifted?
Joe Biden's exit led to an incredible sigh of relief from every Democrat across America who realized they were not going to have to run with him at the top of the ticket. But the fact that he put in his vice president, or at least endorsed her, and she's very likely to get the nomination, changes things less than it would if we had someone else as the Democratic nominee, like one of the many popular Democratic governors. She inherits all the negative views of the Biden administration, most especially the view about illegal immigration, the one issue that she was put in charge of. So what this does is take us back to the period right before Joe Biden's debate meltdown, where Donald Trump has a small lead nationally and a larger lead in the swing states. And we'll see if Kamala Harris can close that gap.
Now, you spoke about the negatives associated with the administration's track record, but obviously there's positives associated with incumbency as well. You have a track record, you've got stability, there's all kinds of positives involved with incumbency. So do you think, from a polling perspective, the Kamala Harris should embrace incumbency and sell that, or do you think she should cut her losses and try and sell change?
We're talking about an administration that struggles to get as much as 40% job approval. That's not exactly the kind of record you want to take into a re-election campaign. You have almost 2/3 of Americans think the country's off on the wrong track, and they believe that the economy was better under Donald Trump than it was under Joe Biden. So I think Kamala Harris needs to try to carve her own path as nearly as she can do so without being burdened by the legacy of the Biden administration.
Whit, in 2020, Joe Biden managed to appeal to some Republican never-Trumpers. I wonder now that Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee, will those same Republican never-Trumpers perhaps grudgingly throw their support behind her, given that she is now the only realistic alternative to another Trump presidency?
We'll have to see with polling going forward. I think it's likely that she may do somewhat better with African Americans and Hispanics, and somewhat worse with blue-collar white voters. But she might scramble the coalitions a little bit, but we'll have to see if she's going to be capable of expanding her coalition. She is not widely respected. She is widely viewed as one of the weaker members of the Biden administration. And she has a tendency, when she's away from her teleprompter, to speak in ways that sound utterly incoherent. So we'll have to see if she's gotten better at that. But there are some of her utterances that would give joy to late-night comics, but probably not anybody else.
Now, Harris does seem to enjoy some advantages over Biden when it comes to young, female and non-white voters. But then she has some disadvantages compared to Biden when it comes to white and older voters. So if there's some kind of demographic trade-off happening now when they change from Biden to Harris, does she on net gain votes or lose votes in the states that matter?
That's the real question. She may do better in the Sun Belt states that have larger numbers of minority voters and less well in the Rust Belt states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that have larger numbers of the older blue-collar white voters. So there may be a trade-off there, but she's got to demonstrate that she can do better than Joe Biden in the various swing states in order to make this thing close.
Women and people of colour are an important voting bloc for Republicans as well as for Democrats. Is there a danger in some of the blatantly sexist and racist attacks we've already seen against Kamala Harris that Republicans could risk alienating those very people they need to draw into the tent?
You focus on policy and you focus on capability rather than on race or on gender. I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on the fact that the policies that Donald Trump is promoting are favored over the Biden and Harris administration on a whole host of issues, the economy and inflation and crime and immigration. So you focus on that rather than on gender or on race. Keep in mind that Barack Obama won a majority of the vote in America when he ran for president, and Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump in 2016. So America does have a record of voting for African American and female candidates in large numbers. So that is not going to be the critical issue, I think, in this election.
Does age now become a problem for Republicans, or was that ever only going to be a problem for Joe Biden in particular?
No, that was a problem for Joe Biden because he looked old and acted old and sounded old. Donald Trump does none of those. He may be within 3 years of Joe Biden, but he stands up for an hour and a half at a rally and never looks tired by the end of it. No, Donald Trump may have a lot of negatives, but lack of energy is not one of them.
Whit Ayers, you have advised a number of Republican candidates who've tried to beat Donald Trump with limited success. I wonder, what has that taught you about taking on Donald Trump, and what would your advice be now to Democrats like Kamala Harris who are trying to beat Donald Trump?
Well, I think they should have nominated one of their more popular governors who would actually shake up this race a lot more than Kamala Harris. But Joe Biden's long delay in pulling out sort of boxed the Democrats in to taking Kamala Harris rather than one of their more popular figures. So Donald Trump is quite a phenomenon, but it helps to remember, if you're a Democrat, that he has never won the popular vote, a majority of the popular vote. He got 46% in 2016 and 47% in 2020. He's never had a majority of Americans who approved of his job performance when he was president. So keep an eye on that 47% number in polling. If Donald Trump can break through that, you know something different has happened. Otherwise, we're likely to have an election where both candidates are somewhere in the mid-40s and end up with a very, very close race.
Whit Ayers, thanks for being with us on Planet America.
It's my pleasure as always.
Joe Biden graduated from Syracuse Law School in 1968.
It's a good law school, right? But I thought I was going to go to either Cornell or anyway.
Where he was a sporting champion.
Runner-up in state scoring, what the heck?
Wow.
But I was a run anyway.
And he soon became one of America's youngest ever senators.
It's not like there's any straight line to it. It's not like I started off to, do that. It's like, Anyway.
Because he knew how to get things done.
The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway.
People said he wasn't ready.
For the longest time, it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway.
They said he'd never be president, but he campaigned everywhere.
From Wisconsin to North Carolina to anyway.
And eventually be that other guy.
And I really think his views on where to take America are older than, anyway.
He inherited a country in chaos.
The place was smashed up. We're hanging, anyway.
But he got on with the job.
We just moved things along, anyway.
And he focused on what's important, like manufacturing.
We're gonna own that industry again. We have, I just, anyway.
And like foreign policy.
Like keeping NATO together, like working, anyway.
Where he took on America's enemies.
Read Putin's speech. It wasn't about just, anyway.
But now he's stepping back to focus on his reading.
I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway.
And enjoying his golden years.
I spend a lot of time because, anyway.
How can you sum up 50 years in politics?
Look, folks, this is, well, anyway.
Joe Biden.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this anyway.
Now, there are plenty of questions still about how former President Trump came within just millimetres of being killed by that would-be assassin. And most of those questions are being asked of the United States Secret Service, whose job, of course, it is to keep presidents and former presidents safe. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle was hauled before the House Oversight Committee this week, and she began by admitting this was their worst failure in decades.
The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed. As a director of the United States Secret Service, I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency.
OK, mea culpa, but still, members of Congress had plenty of questions for Director Cheatle, like this from Democrat Jamie Raskin.
How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
Good question, but Director Cheatle didn't have many good answers.
We are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully.
So leave it with us, we'll get back to you. Although Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks she already has the answer.
The people there knew that there was a danger. They knew there was a threat to President Trump, and it was allowed to happen. Was there a stand-down order, Ms. Cheatle? Was there a conspiracy to kill President Trump?
Absolutely not.
By the end of the day, though, both Raskin and Taylor Greene and plenty of others were calling on Director Cheatle to resign, which indeed she did earlier today.
Yeah, a 60-day inquiry is a very long time to wait to be rebutting those Marjorie Taylor Greene types of contributions, John, but no one's going to be mourning the back of Cheatle after a week spent denying that Trump's team ever requested additional security resources and were rebuffed. The Secret Service said that that was an untrue assertion, and in fact they'd added resources for Trump's team. Well, it turns out they lied. The Secret Service did repeatedly deny requests for additional resources and personnel from Trump's security detail, and we know that because they've now admitted it. And the result of this was Trump's security didn't necessarily have a lot of actual Secret Service agents.
I'm hearing there were very few. I don't want to give an exact number, but very few actual, I don't think anyone else has reported this, actual Secret Service poststanders at that site. That they were temp HSI, Homeland Security folks, which are, they're great folks. I'm not knocking them, but that's not what they do specifically. We do protection and we're trained for that.
And that since has been corroborated, by the way. Furthermore, it seems that the Secret Service was aware of the threat posed by this building days before the rally, but for some reason they didn't include it in its official security perimeter. Instead, the Secret Service left it to the local police, even though the local police alerted the Secret Service that they lacked the resources to guard the building the shooter was on. And that was confirmed by the Secret Service, by the way, that they knew that. But they still left that building to the local police anyway. Then there's the minor matter of the shooter being noticed 3 hours before the shooting at the security screening for the rally because he was carrying around a rangefinder, which can only be used for setting up a long-range shot. Then at 5:30, security noticed him behaving suspiciously, but they did nothing. They didn't detain him, they didn't follow him, they didn't delay the rally, they just took a photo of him, and then 40 minutes later, he shot Trump. Finally, John, according to conservative podcaster Dan Bongino, who is an ex-Secret Service guy, he's still got mates in the service, obviously, and he's been right a lot so far, this is the reason that the building's roof was actually unguarded.
That was supposed to be a local police department counter-sniper post. There were 2 USSS Secret Service counter-sniper teams. That was supposed to be an additional one. Apparently, for some reason, I don't care to speculate on, it's not what I do, that post never showed up.
Now, we don't know if he's right about that. That's completely unconfirmed. But if that does turn out to be true, a whole lot of people are going to be joining that director in Sacked World.
Yes, very interesting indeed. That is it for another trip to Planet America, though. We'll see you back here at a similar time next week. It's a bit of a movable feast at the moment, so check your local guides or catch us on iView, YouTube or Facebook.
And we have the Fireside Chat on ABC News this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time and in all those other places John mentioned as well.
Bye-bye.